Okay, so for this particular segment, we're actually refilming it. It's what you might call a developing story. But let's take it from the top, John.
Right. So I received some reports from folks this week that were saying, "Hey, I got this brand new Xbox One, original Xbox One VCR, the first model, which is cool, new old stock, whatever. Tried to connect it. It needs to connect online to set up in the first place. You can't do anything until it happens. Problem is, they were running into an error. So every time it tries to update itself, it just bombs out. You can't update it. You can't use the console." Then someone else showed me a thread of people that had bought some used Xbox Ones, that worked, but then they did a factory reset. And upon factory reset, guess what? Same problem. Couldn't update the console, couldn't use it. It was basically locked out. So we've talked about this whole online activation thing in the past. Not a big fan of it. And this is, part of the reason why. Our concern had been, oh, the servers might go down. But in this case, it seems like something was broken with the update for original Xbox Ones. So of course, this led us to actually test it. And both of us happen to have some Xbox Ones lying around. And it turns out the problem is a little bit more complicated than I think we initially thought.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, obviously going into this, we were talking about the concept that maybe the original firmware or, having a reset Xbox One was basically causing the problem that you couldn't update because of that.
Right.
Now, you and I both have OG Xbox One VCRs. In fact, I brought mine out for testing. There it
Yep.
is. The original review model with the barcodes on them. They updated into standard retail units. I think yours is just a
Yeah,
standard
I
retail
bought
unit.
mine at retail in
Right.
France,
Okay.
actually, no less. And I haven't used it since 2017, I think. So it's been
Yeah. Uh huh.
completely powered off to sit in a drawer, thanks to the Xbox
Yeah.
One S and then X.
Yeah, because we both moved on to the One S because it's just the superior
Yes,
unit. So
HDR,
yeah,
baby.
it's our VCR units are like frozen in time. I've got a 2018 firmware on mine, April 2018, seemingly. And yeah, directly after we filmed yesterday's segment saying, there's something amiss here, maybe Microsoft should look at it, we decided to actually retest our units. And it doesn't apply to Xbox Ones that are in that kind of factory reset state. Our units, as is, simply will not update at all.
Correct.
And yeah, and then so the next phase was to move to the USB update, right? Because you can update the Xbox One
Which is
offline.
good.
You have to download some files from Microsoft and go from there. And that doesn't work either.
Didn't it seem
And
to
you
work?
tried it with yours.
Yeah. So, for mine, I actually only tried the network update, and it just gets to a certain point and then it gives the error has occurred or whatever message.
Yep.
But I think you
Hmm.
did that initially, and then you decided, oh, I'll try this USB thing. And I think you messaged me like, oh, it works. Or maybe no, you tried USB first and it didn't
Yep.
work.
It didn't work, yeah. And so, what do we do in this sort of situation? Well, the obvious thing to do is raise the alarm with Microsoft, right?
Right.
And yeah, they suggested trying various things, and one of them was a different update. If you actually go to the update page on Xbox One, it's quite convoluted at this point, depending on what your firmware is. But the end point is that I've got an Xbox now that's in an update loop that it's not working. It resets, says there's an error, and it tries to finish the firmware, and then goes back and does the same thing again. So yeah, it's going to require an intervention from Microsoft at this point to get this working. I'm sure it doesn't apply to all Xbox One consoles. Maybe consoles that have been updated since 2018. I mean, that's a long time ago.
Six years.
I was suspecting they probably work fine, but there's going to be an issue with a lot of units. I mean, brand new stock of a 2013 console. I'm going to suggest that's quite rare, thin on the
Yeah.
ground, but there's likely to be a lot of used units that are being sold on eBay that maybe haven't been used for a long time, or maybe people are just getting their consoles out of storage to, have a look at Xbox One. I think, we can't say for sure it's all of those units, but it's certainly both of ours and all of these other people who are making these reports. And you can't really do anything with the console. You can't update it. You can't go online because you can't update it. And so I swapped some DMs with Jason Ronald at Microsoft yesterday. And the good news is that they are now aware of the problem. They are actively looking into it. There will be a resolution, I'm sure, at this point. However, this is kind of like the scenario that you've been talking about for years now, which is that when you've got a console that relies upon an update to actually function, there's basically a potential failure point in there, which means you could be left with a brick.
Correct, yeah. Obviously, at this point, given that there are still Xbox One games being sold, it's in their best interest to make sure this is fixed. This wasn't intentional, obviously. I think it's just a weird little bug in the way the firmware update process works. But, and some people might be saying, who cares? It's an old Xbox One. But I do think it's important to keep these older machines running. There are potential use cases in the future. And it's not good to just have hardware just cease functioning because of some online arbitrary update like that, right? Like, I think that's not good at all. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that could hurt the longevity of these machines in the long term. And this is, for the average person that's just buying these, and then when the generation's over, they ditch it and they get the new thing. Who cares? But for long-term preservation, for like long-term usage, retro collectors and all that, and there's a lot of us, it's not good to have this problem. And it's currently potentially an issue with all Xbox consoles since Xbox One, and PS5s since the PS5 Slim, since that requires a disk drive activation, which apparently is due to like some, like, I guess like the movie industry or something, where you can't have a removable drive that doesn't have some sort of like activation or something. There's something about that in there, but essentially that caused this problem. And so now PS5 is currently in the same boat, where both these machines essentially will rely on an update from the internet to function. The good thing, of course, is that I think, well, at least in the Xbox case, it looks like, USB is at least still possible, even though it did fail at this point. But that failure isn't due to the internet per se. That's just due to a bug, I assume, in the firmware itself, where it's not able to update from an older revision. And I actually would be curious to know at what point this started. And I wonder if there's a way to get older versions of firmware, because like Sony keeps like old firmware on their servers, like even going back to like PS3 and PSP and such. And I wonder if there's a way like on Microsoft's side to like sort of slowly walk your Xbox One up to the current firmware, like find one from like later 2018 and then do a 2019 and then 2020 and so on until you get to where we're at now. So
I've got to say, though, it is good news that there's a USB route for Xbox consoles to be updated, but it does require people to be mirroring them in case the original source is no longer available. And you're quite right. On the PlayStation side, I think it's because the console is hackable.
Correct.
People tend to hoard those older firmwares on the off chance that maybe there's a hack for using them. Not so much on Microsoft, because hackers have never really been particularly interested in hacking Xbox consoles because of there is some sort of open there's like dev mode, isn't there, for Xbox consoles, so they are in a sense accessible. So this sort of dedication to preserving potential loopholes and hacks isn't really there. But that's the situation we've got at the moment, where we've got these older consoles now. No idea whether it applies to all of the older ones or to what extent, other ones are fine. But certainly between our two consoles, we can't update them at the moment.
Which means, so I actually messed around with it. Older Xbox One disc-based games do work. But if you try something more recent, it was not able to play it. It requires that to be updated to do it.
Hmm.
So, interesting situation all around. And in that case as well, if you were to factory reset a system from this point, you'd also be locked out. And there's just
Yeah.
nothing you can
Hmm.
do at that point. It's just stuck in the loop. So,
Yeah, I think there just needs to be a general duty of care from platform holders to ensure that it is actually possible to use your machine no matter what. Just the idea that you've got this machine, it should be able to function
exactly.
on its own, without having too much of an effort to get it up and running. And that's kind of the issue that this is raising here. And we've actually got an example now of older hardware that, isn't fully operational anymore.
I am also quite concerned about the PS5 situation because that whole disk drive activation, it's not like you can't get a USB firmware to fix that, right? Like if the
Yeah.
drive doesn't function until you activate it, then you can't use any disk games. And obviously if the servers are down, you can't go online in the first place. The only hope there is, like you said, there's more hacking happening on the PlayStation side typically.
Yeah.
So perhaps somebody will solve that problem in due time.
Hmm.
But either way, this kind of stuff sucks. And
Yeah.
I hope Nintendo doesn't follow it because the Switch, of course, requires none of this. You can just boot up a brand new Switch out of the box and just go. Use your game
Yeah.
cartridges, whatever. You don't need the internet at all to use the Switch.
Yes, I think overall this has been an interesting case of, where things can go wrong. In this particular case, I'm pretty sure that Microsoft will get it fixed. Maybe by the time this direct goes public, who knows? But yeah, it's not great, is it, to
No,
find these failure points because we have been talking about it and have been worried about it for years now.
exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much
Okay.
it.